What's up, everybody? Welcome back to I Came with Fire podcast. Tonight, we are here with Robert Renfrow. Robert is a retired U.S. Air Force Security Forces defender. A friend of mine was a supervisor at one point when we were stationed together at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, but I'll let him tell you guys about himself. And he's got a pretty awesome YouTube page as well. So, Robert.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me on. So, like Brandon said, I just retired about a year and a half ago. Moved down to Navarre, Florida. That's where I'm hanging out now, just hanging out on the beach and doing as much fishing and kayaking and scuba diving as I can. So just kind of living the dream down here in the beautiful state of Florida.
Man, I can't wait. I love the Panhandle. My family, like I think I told you before, they live right around where you're at, and when every time I go and visit, man, being at the water there is legitimately like medicine to me. So beautiful.
Yeah, it's awesome, especially during like November, December time frame when you don't have to worry about any of the June grass or any of the weeds and stuff coming in. I mean, it's crystal clear water. So
It is, yeah. Well, tell everybody your page name so they can go find you. We'll share a link too, so everybody can go and subscribe.
yeah, absolutely. So it's active duty outdoors. Though I'm not active duty anymore, but it's kind of the name's just kind of stuck, and I'm not changing it. So that's where it's at.
Yeah. You're
So
still active in the outdoors.
yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's a lot of scuba diving, and a lot of fishing now. The page
Yeah.
has kind of done a whole lot of different turns and twists since I started it about
Yeah.
6 years ago, which because hobbies change, locations change, especially being in the military.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. It's just a hobby, something to do on my off time.
Man, I've seen you some of your videos and stuff out there on a kayak, and man, I've been on some like small. I've been like a jet ski. I've been on smaller boats out there, like out in the middle of the Gulf, and I've had dolphins. I've seen sharks and stuff like that. But I mean, what's like the craziest thing you've seen out there? Because you're out there like sunrise, which like from what I understand is when a lot of these things are like feeding and stuff like that, most active.
Yeah, so we try to get out there before the sun comes up. One right now because the weather's a lot cooler, but
Oh,
before
yeah.
the sun comes up, as soon as the sun comes up, it's miserable out there. But we try to
Yeah.
get out there to beat the crowds so we can get a good parking spot, launch the kayaks, and um, it's not really. I mean, it's kind of eerie and scary when you go out there and it's still dark outside, but I mean, it's kind of calming because the sun's just kind of peeking up and you got to kind of see it
Yeah.
over the horizon. But the craziest thing that I've seen out there, or the craziest thing I've caught, was probably like a 6 foot sandbar shark that I had took me 35 minutes to actually reel him up to the kayak, and then once he got to the kayak, he broke off and went back down. But that was probably
Yeah.
the craziest thing so far.
That is pretty crazy. Like, what? How would you even cook that thing?
I don't know how you get in a kayak, so
Right, that's a good point. Yeah, right.
Isn't even on the agenda, but
Yeah, note to self: don't share a kayak with a shark. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah, I was sitting there and I was thinking, you're like, oh, I got a 6 foot something with my kayak. I'm like, how is that thing not like tipping you over, like pulling you in? Like,
Well,
probably damn near close.
I got a pretty good kayak. That's kind of what
Right.
you got to make sure you get one of those before you go out in the Gulf.
Yeah,
that makes
that's
sense.
funny. Cool. So, when Zach and I've been planning doing this episode for a while, and when we talked about doing it, we're like, when are we going to pull the trigger on this one? And we decided to make it, this weekend. And so you commented and you said that you actually had known and talked to Randy Weaver, which I found to be pretty remarkable because, again, the military is kind of undefeated with networking and who you know and all that stuff.
Right.
And you'd said that it's not controversial because it's definitely government overreach, and that's 100% the truth. And I agree, and perhaps could use a better adjective. It's controversial in that the FBI decided to do what it did. And if I feel like there might be a lot of people who are unfamiliar with Ruby Ridge, so I'll kind of like give a brief like recap, but like really would just like to hear anything that you guys talked about what he said, because obviously unfortunately he's since passed on. But so Ruby Ridge essentially, from everything that I've read online, was an investigation by the ATF, basically to look into Randy Weaver selling sawed-off shotguns to supposedly a white supremacist group. And then when there was a bench warrant issued for his arrest for not showing up to these court appearances, they decided that they were going to go and investigate him. Well, they learned that he was a Green Beret in Vietnam, and decided that they were going to get super tactical and covert and get in ghillie suits and all kinds of stuff and illegally enter his property. And we're spying on him. And essentially, his son, 14-year-old son, unfortunately ended up coming upon some of these guys in ghillie suits. They shot and killed the family dog. Sam Weaver ended up killing an FBI agent, and then they shot and killed his 14-year-old son. Shortly after that, there was an 11-day siege where Vicki Weaver, Randy's wife, was shot and killed, which honestly I find really disturbing, honestly, because she was holding her infant child. And I found an article from a Washington state-based newspaper from 24 August 1992. The newspaper is called the Spokesman Review. It says that the FBI considers Vicki and the rest of the family and the friend to be hostages. So to me, if you've classified this person as a hostage and they step outside, they're a non-combatant, they're holding a child, and then you take their life. So that doesn't really add up, right? Essentially, Randy found out that a specific lawyer decided to take their case and defend them, and then after 11 days, surrendered. I see a lot of stuff online where this just gets brushed under the rug by calling him a white supremacist. And then there's some pretty wild connections between the Waco, Texas incident and then the Oklahoma City murder building bombing with Timothy McVeigh. So we can get into that later, but honestly, Rob, I would just be really interested to hear like how you came to know Randy, and then, just how some of these conversations went, and what he had to say. You're literally hearing it from the horse's mouth. So
well, before we kind of get into that real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to touch on some specifics about what happened and stuff. The ATF and FBI, they were trying to catch. So there was a white supremacist group that was near Randy Weaver. He did go to a couple meetings there, but he was never actually a white supremacist. He didn't agree with their political ideologies or anything like that. He mostly went there because they were the only people within his region. So it was kind of out of necessity. The FBI and ATF was actually investigating the white supremacy group for potentially staging incidents across the United States or attacks or, domestic terrorism and stuff. And they met Randy Weaver through in a mole that they planted in the white supremacy group.
Right.
And when they tried to get more information in the group, they couldn't get it, but they saw that Randy Weaver was respected enough by the group. So they actually staged Randy Weaver to commit a felony. They went up to him with shotguns and was like, "Hey, I need to make some quick cash. Can you help me out and cut the shotgun? I don't have tools to do this." And the ATF agent was like, "Cut it right here." And it was an inch below the felony line. And so Randy Weaver, just being a dude trying to help out his buddy, cut it and didn't even think anything of it. And then when you get down to the indictment where they told him to appear in court, he received a notice saying that he was supposed to appear in court on March 20th, but then the court messed up somehow there was a clerical error, and he was supposed to be there February 20th, and he didn't obviously arrive because he was told March 20th. And he actually was planning to arrive, and that is what caused this huge issue. And it was about 8 months where he decided that, okay, they're messing with me, I don't want to do this, where they just existed on Ruby Ridge and didn't interfere with anything or anyone. And then finally the FBI and ATF was like, well, we can't just let this felon get away with it. And that's when they started doing the military tactics. So it wasn't, from my point of view, and obviously you'll get more into it, Rob, but from my point of view, he was just a guy trying to live out in the woods on his own, be left alone, and was tricked into committing a felony, and then a whole bunch of other things went down. We'll get more into it. I learned a lot of stuff in the last week investigating that I didn't know, so it went pretty well. But yeah, you can take it from here, I guess, Rob, and kind of talk about what Randy and you spoke about, or his perception.
Yeah, so absolutely. So my wife is from Montana. Of course, I was stationed up there a number of times for a number of years. It's where we met, was in Great Falls. Her mom was also from Great Falls, but at some point in time, she had moved up to Kalispell, Montana, which is another beautiful area of Montana, where she ended up meeting Randy Weaver. And it was through them that I ended up meeting Randy at her house a couple of times, just talking over the bonfire, having a couple drinks and chit-chatting. And at first, when he introduced himself as Randy Weaver, to me, I was like, well, I'm Rob Renfrow. Like, I didn't know who Randy Weaver was. It was just a guy. We got to talking, and it wasn't until we were sitting around the campfire that it kind of clicked on me, and he started telling me the story about Ruby Ridge and who he was and the whole thing that happened. And this was probably, probably 2010, 2011, maybe. So, when Ruby Ridge happened, back in 1990,
92.
So I was
August of 92.
I was 11 years old, and I remember seeing it on the news back then. So, it didn't really click to me, as what I had remembered when I was a kid. But through time, I figured out that this is the whole thing that was on the the siege and everything was on the news, and it was kind of crazy. And so we just got to talking about the whole situation. He told me his side of the story on everything that happened, and it was pretty crazy to hear that. Just the whole overreach and kind of how he was, like you said, how he was kind of asked to saw off shotguns. And I guess that's where the controversy comes in too, is, which is a true controversy, is, why was he hanging out with Aryan nations and why was he hanging out with heads and doing all that stuff? So, but like a lot of us, that when we get out of the military, and I did it for a while, I locked myself up. I bought myself a farm, and I wanted to be completely away from society and away from people, and I just wanted to live my life and raise my family. So I definitely, I see where that aspect of wanting to just be left alone comes from.
Definitely. I think that's one of the things that a lot of vets feel, because you spend so much of your life giving to the government, the Air Force, whatever branch you're in. At the end of the day, your career's over. You just kind of want to live your life and not have to deal with all the regimented bureaucracy and all that stuff that the government, that comes with working for the government, And another thing I saw too in my research is that if you go to certain newspapers, that in their articles, all these newspapers put their articles online now. There's an article, you read one I read in Missouri, right? And it talks about him. The headline, it discusses, the siege is over, right? But then you go to one from the New York Times and it says, siege with white supremacists has ended, right? So this kind of one of the things that I would hope to do through this episode is hopefully disabuse a lot of the untruths and the misinformation that seems to be out there, because you find stuff now, some of the articles, especially after he passed away, it's like white supremacist from Ruby Ridge passed away at 74 or whatever. And immediately that, if you're one of those people that just reads the headlines, and there's a lot of people that just do that, I'm guilty of that too, right? You just see, well, who cares? You know what I mean? Or, well, good, or whatever. Right. And without even understanding what actually happened and understanding, like, Zach, I'm glad you brought up about the ATF agent basically tricking him into committing a crime, which is illegal, right? And just say, at the end of all of this, it's a couple of things I find really disturbing is that the FBI actually considers this a success, and that they actually issued awards and things like that to some of the agents that were involved. When in reality, the Weaver family sued the U.S. government and ended up getting a $3.1 million settlement for them because they were wrong. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but like, that's not a success, and throwing that in the W column to me is pretty disgraceful. But, I'm just kind of wondering.
They had we talked about it, the two complete failures, Ruby Ridge and Waco. So that was two operations that were led up by the ATF and completely overstepped their bounds, did stuff that they were not even authorized to do. I mean, if you look at Ruby Ridge, where the FBI went in there and they revised their rules of engagement, and their rules of engagement said, shoot anybody with a gun. So us being in the military and being law enforcement in the military, when would it ever be acceptable to ever just shoot somebody with a gun? Not even in wartime.
Never.
Can you go and say, oh, that's my enemy, he has a gun, I'm going to shoot him.
They have to meet the totality of circumstances, a lot of things that go into it.
And I don't know if in 1992, if they had a totality of circumstances, I don't know what their rules of engagement exactly were back then, but I can guarantee you it was not shoot anybody that's carrying a weapon.
No.
One, we're in America, and two, I got my Second Amendment. I'll carry whatever weapon I want, especially on my own property. So I mean,
what's
in
interesting
Idaho
about that?
Yeah,
what's interesting about that piece
Yeah.
is that the FBI told the ATF that like, oh, he's an ex like Green Beret. They said if you see him, just shoot him, and that was after like the initial firefight. There was no like their rules of engagement after they killed his dog and his son was if you see Randy at all, shoot him.
Right.
Right.
And it didn't matter if he had anything on him. That was their go-to. So, yeah.
So, was there anything like specifically that you remember talking to him about like what happened in those 11 days?
So a lot of the stuff, it was more of like he didn't want to give up. Like he admitted himself he's definitely stubborn, and that's one thing that he, looking back on it, that's one of the things that he regretted was being so stubborn. And if he would have just went down and said, okay, I'm here, arrest me, take me to court because I failed to appear. He definitely understood that could have alleviated a lot of the problems that they had. However, looking back, I mean, that's hindsight. Looking at the actual circumstances on paper as it stood, you got a summons to appear on March 20th for a court date that was on February 20th. You already have a warrant. So they, shortly after they had that warrant, they did a ruse and, they acted like they were broke down the side of the road. Randy came down to help him out and they arrested him then. And that's where he was charged with failure to appear. And then he was given that court date to show up for the actual sawed-off shotgun stuff. So, it's the whole thing was just a mess to begin with. And with hindsight, he would have never even known that he missed that court date because the letter was wrong. So,
yeah. What bothers me about that is so if he committed a felony, I understand there's the rights of the accused, all this type of stuff, but and that he's like a person who lives out in the woods, has own 20 acres, all this type of stuff, and you had to set up a hole, you're broken down just to get him to come in and interact with you because he wasn't going to in any other capacity interact with anyone else. Why don't you just grab him then and just bring him in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It goes to the same thing with the Waco stuff when he ran every day, the same route, and they knew the route that he ran, and instead of just grabbing him one day when he was running outside of the compound in Waco, they didn't. They waited for him to go back in and then start a whole problem. So it's the ATF had two chances to just grab the person they wanted from the very beginning, and both times just blew it.
Mm-hmm. And if you actually look at the dates, you're talking about the time that he failed to appear on March 20th, and then it wasn't until August 21st of 1992, which was almost 18 months after the fact. So you're telling me that you let a hardened felon go unchecked for a year and a half, and then you're going to all of a sudden send in a special operations group surveillance team to survey his property? I mean, it kind of smells fishy just from the get-go. It's almost like they didn't want him to come off of Ruby Ridge.
Yeah. Because they knew they did things wrong and they didn't want it to come out. So, and then once they were like, oh, we can just kill them all. And then, history is written by the victors. There's no one else to counter what the FBI or ATF says. Then it was whatever their story they wanted to do. So
it honestly makes you wonder what would have happened had Sam and the dog not been just out on the property happenstance and come across those people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you wonder, what would have happened? Like what you said, Zach, history is written by the victors. Would this have been just some sort of surprise? Hey, we're here, and then take some people out and then call it something totally different, or what do you think?
It's interesting because the whole Sam thing, specifically, I just want to touch on that a little bit. I was when I was reading about it and learning more about it, I put myself in Sam's shoes, right? So you live out on this 20-acre area. I'm assuming that your father probably isn't telling you about like the FBI or ETF like coming to get you, because like why would you need to know as the son or anything like that, right? And
Yeah.
even if he did, you would expect like if they showed up to announce themselves or something like that. So like imagine you're Sam and you're out hanging out with your dog, playing fetch or just goofing off or whatever, right? You're out in the middle of the forest, so of course you're gonna have a gun. I think Sam had like a 308 like rifle for like hunting. Like it wasn't like an AR-15 or anything like that. It just had a normal like 308 like rifle, right?
Yeah.
Wood stock, all that type of stuff. And then out of the bushes come like two people like wearing ghillie suits, looking real sketchy. They shoot your dog in front of you. Like what else would you do? They never once announced that ATF or FBI or anything.
Well, not to mention, those three-letter agencies would have no meaning to a 14-year-old, right? And then no meaning to a 14-year-old. And at that point, if somebody shoots your dog, you don't know what's going on. It's like self-defense at that point. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Somebody's shooting at you. So there's just nothing about what happened is okay or legal in any way, shape, or form. And to me, it's just. Go ahead, Rob.
That was Kevin's, because Kevin was with Sammy when they were out walking the dog, and when the ATFs said that they announced that they were ATF and to put their hands up. So Kevin's story of the situation was that once that happened, that Sammy had opened fire on the agents, and then the agents opened up fire and killed Sammy, and so Kevin shot back, ended up killing one of the ATF agents or one of the U.S. Marshals.
Right.
So, I mean, it all came down to who fired first. And they try to say that the marshals didn't fire at all. But, I mean, it came out in the actual investigation that one of the marshals, the marshal that was killed, actually had 7 rounds out of his magazine that were gone. So they're trying to say that if Kevin fired first or Sammy fired first and killed that marshal right away, how would he ever have gotten 7 rounds off? And how was Sammy shot in the back?
One of the documentary things I've watched was breaking down like the ballistics and like where they were specifically placed and everything. And it pretty much brought up that it would have been almost impossible for Sam to have ever shot first. Because had he have, then the agent probably would have been dead. Because Sam only shot 1 bullet and hit that agent like square on, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
Right. And I believe that the ballistics that actually came out was that Agent Cooper was the one that fired the bullet that killed Sammy. So, I mean, and that's kind of what tore up their whole prosecution for the FBI and the ATF, was that their story was so wishy-washy and nobody had the same story, and they couldn't figure out who fired what shot and who was shooting at who and who missed shots. I mean, even coming down to the sniper that killed Vicki, his initial story in court was that he didn't know that she was behind the curtain. However, it came to find out later on that he actually had a drawing the day after that he made a sketch of his account for it, because every sniper, that's what they do. They account for their shots. And in his sketch, he actually had what were hands on the curtain, or 2 heads in the curtain, where he said that there wasn't 2 heads ever there during his testimony. So, I mean, their whole story of the accounts of who fired what bullet. I mean, we know as law enforcement, you have to account for your rounds. I mean, that's one of the agents was a 14-year veteran, the one that was killed. And, these guys had no idea where their bullets went, which for a special operations team, right? Because this is a special operations team.
Yeah.
To not know where the bullets go and to miss targets. I don't know.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. And when you sit in court and try and lie, I mean, you're not just undermining everything you say, but everything that your side is trying to say, And so it's just nothing boded well from them from the beginning. And it's interesting too to me that some of these agents ended up being some of the same ones that found themselves in Texas for Waco, and again making some of the same mistakes, doing some of the same illegal shit. Hold on, and I want to say this too. I keep saying the word mistake, but like I don't think it's a mistake. I think it's just BS tactics that they think they're going to get away with. So I'm just going to say that. Whatever word that is, that's what it is. Zach, you say something?
Yeah. The sniper team leader who was at Weaver Ridge, not the one who shot his wife, Weaver's wife, but the one who was in charge of that other sniper was the same sniper who had like David Koresh's, like he swore that he saw David Koresh at like the top of like the tower at Waco, and he could have took the shot, but he decided not to, because he actually thought, this is actually good credit to him, he thought back to Ruby Ridge. In his interview, he said he didn't shoot because he wasn't sure that it was David Koresh, and he didn't want another Ruby Ridge incident where they accidentally shot like the wrong person. Because in Waco, they were told if you see David Koresh, you could shoot him at any second too. Like there was not if you see David Koresh and you're sure it's him, you can shoot him. That was also their policy there. You were talking about how like it took like 18 months, right, for them to like do anything with like Weaver. In one of the documentaries I watched, there was a guy in Texas, East Texas. I'm trying to find the exact place, so give me just one real quick second. Just East Texas. I can't remember the exact name. His name was John Joe Gray. This happened 7 years after Ruby Ridge. He got stopped by a state trooper, got into a little scuffle with the trooper because he felt like he was being like stopped for a bullshit reason. He bit the trooper, right? And then he ran away and went to his land. He got to his land and everything like that, and there was like a little like a siege there too because they knew he had a bunch of weapons and a ton of land. But eventually, like the sheriff of the area said, "All right, we're not gonna push him unless he comes out." And so then they were like, "We're just gonna kind of leave him there." So then a year goes by, 5 years go by, 10 years, 18 years. Like he's dead now, but he died on the property. They never went in and got him. It was like 18, 19 years, and he was just chilling on his property. He never left it. He had people come bring him supplies and stuff. He lived off his land. But you said it took like 18 months for them to deal with Weaver or to finally do something. They probably could have just left him alone, and he would have done nothing. Like they left the dude alone in Texas. He just stayed on his land. You're not going to have a whole Ruby Ridge incident over a dude who just bit a trooper. Like that seems a little ridiculous. But
right, and I mean, if you're
thinking about,
and you're talking about the 18 months, like in 18 months, you're telling me that Randy didn't go into town one time, like you didn't.
That's true.
Have surveillance on him, like you just automatically jump to a special operations team. I guarantee you had surveillance on the guy. Like it would have been way easier to just snatch him up as he went in to go get milk and cigarettes.
It would have been if you're so worried, like you're thinking here you are planning this operation. You're like, okay, this target is a Vietnam vet, Green Beret, right? Why on earth would you think it's better to just come at this guy in a way that he could perceive as like a hostile act? You know what I mean? Other than, like you said, man, go pick the dude up at the grocery store parking lot. You know what I mean? That seems, if I was planning some, and I I've been on, teams where we're executing a warrant before, right? And it's like, you want to do it in an advantageous way. It almost feels like there's an attempt to collect more illegal activity, right? And instead of just being direct about what's going on, they probably thought they were going to milk this situation and turn it into something it wasn't, instead of just handling the business, getting it over with. And if this really was somebody who is dangerous or whatever, you're getting them off the street. But that wasn't the plan. To me, this is some sort of like situation to milk something out to hope something else happened.
Right. Well, I think when the Fed boys were pretty much told no, right? When they were told no, hey, be our informant or else we'll tell everyone that you saw the shotgun an inch lower than you should have. And he was like, nah. He went back to his land. I bet they were upset with that. They're like, I'm the ATF. I'm the FBI.
Did you really think that you were going to bribe or coerce a Vietnam Green Beret? Did you really think that was going to happen and go well for you? Like, how dumb are you?
Yeah.
Like, for real.
They and then once it blew up to something like so large, obviously they were all trying to like they had like helicopters flying around everywhere. Yeah. Like it was like a war zone to the ATF and FBI, and to Randy Weaver, he's just sitting there with like his can't go see his son.
Yeah, literally kids.
When he tried to go see his son's body like the next day or to go to retrieve it, he got to another firefight, and they just started shooting at him. So it's like. Come on, like have some type of human decency. And it kind of goes, I think it goes back to what you were saying about titles. And they're like, well, white supremacists, blah, blah, blah. I'm pretty sure every ATF and FBI agent there, in their mind, had unhumanized Randy Weaver
Yeah.
and unhumanized his family. To them,
Yeah.
they were a crazy, anti-government, racist mini cult, and they had to be stopped.
Exactly, man. And we've had that conversation before about how when you other somebody, right, and you other a group, you other a person, it becomes so easy to break rules, dehumanize them. You know, it's something that we've seen over and over and over again. And it just, I agree with you completely. That's exactly probably what happened. And not to mention how much misinformation do you think those people that were out there, because there's people that were there when it started, and there are all the other people that showed up after the fact, right? You know, how many times have you been on scene somewhere and somebody's just telling you stuff about what's going on, and whether they're doing it on purpose or not, and more than likely they're not, they're giving you info and it ends up being wrong. I've read I'm a flight chief. I've read the blotter before. It's been like, yeah, I was actually there. This is not what happened, but this would have been the official account. You know what I mean? So like get out of the seat. I'm going to write this up. I was sitting there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where it becomes so easy to think that somebody is something they're not, or something is what it isn't. And it's really sad to me. Like you said, I like that you said you put yourself in Sam's shoes. Like, it's got to be pretty sad to be, I can't even imagine the emotions they were all feeling, but to know that you can't even go to your son's body, and that the FBI found it just because they were tightening their like security group. You know what I mean? Like the circle. It's wild, man. There's so much. It's just an American citizen you're doing this to.
And what you want to get to, like, emotions and stuff. So when they shot, her name was Vicki, correct?
Vicki, yeah.
When they shot Vicki, according to the sniper, he thought he shot Randy Weaver. That's who he thought he shot, according to his situation or whatever, like after the fact.
Yeah.
But for days after Vicki was shot, they were on the loudspeaker telling Vicki, come out with your family, come have pancakes with your kids. Imagine being Weaver, sitting in your cabin next to your dead wife, and the FBI for days is telling your wife to come out. Like, from his point of view, you're mocking him.
Right.
You're destroying his like wife's name. You're doing emotional damage, and the FBI and ATF still to this day say that they didn't know that she was dead, and whether they did or didn't is besides the fact. But like,
it just doesn't make sense. Who did you think you shot? Like, if you go and look up a lot of the like photos that were captured when the siege was still ongoing, there's pictures of Vicki standing outside on the property in a nightgown. You know what I mean? Like, you knew what she looked like. And I guarantee you, all those photos, we know how procedure is. All those photos and everything, they were probably given to people so they knew who they were engaging with, just in case. It's rural Idaho. I mean, what part of Idaho really isn't rural, right? But, you may encounter other people, and there were people there that were protesting. There were people there that were, signs, picketing, all that stuff about what was going on. It's just, to me, like what you said, it doesn't add up. How do you not know who you shot? Especially if, like you said, Rob, like, you're professional, you should know. Like, you have a scoped rifle. You know what I mean? I don't know. There's just so much about it doesn't make any sense.
One, you're a sniper, so you got to be pretty much your top shot, right? And not only are you a sniper, but you're a special operations team sniper. I mean, that's like saying, that's like being a SEAL Team 6 sniper. The guy is not going to pull the trigger unless he has positive identification of who he's shooting.
The sniper who shot Vicki was a prior Army, like Delta Force member and a sniper in the Army. So he's not. He's known every shot he's ever taken. He knows the face of every person he shot, like for sure. Like, there's no way he doesn't know.
Yeah, and here's the thing too. One of the accounts I read said that the FBI thought that Randy was charging them, right? That he was going to engage an FBI helicopter. So I don't know. How do you make that mistake? Again, it just sounds like just BS. I don't know. What you can attribute to malice, you can probably also attribute to incompetence, right? But it's hard to believe there's that level of incompetence, like you said, Rob, when you're dealing with people at that level of professionalism. I mean, wouldn't you agree? It's just,
Absolutely. And, looking at the time frame when everything happened, Randy was, he's kind of the forerunner for what we see now as the guys that want to just live off the land.
Yeah, it's true.
It wasn't common back then for people to say, I don't want anything to do with the government. I want to be by myself. The government doesn't tell me what to do. I'm not going to go to work. I'm not going to be your henchman. I'm going to live my life in the mountains.
It's going to be free.
And the government didn't know how to deal with that. And they didn't know how to deal with the guy that says, no, I'm not going to be your informant. So they took this whole thing and they blew it out of proportion. And when you follow that from that to Waco. I mean, they say that they've learned their lessons on the way that they handle businesses, but just a few years ago, if you look at the the Bureau of Land Management standoff over, I think it was Washington State.
You're talking about Bundy Ranch?
Yep.
The Bundy Ranch thing? Yep.
So, I mean, we're talking about the same thing where the government doesn't know how to deal with its citizens.
Yeah, this is literally just you're getting into this standoff over grazing rights for cattle. You know what I mean? It's just like there's got to be an easier way to deal with this other than bringing guns. And I'll just say this, like, thank God we do have something like the Second Amendment and the ability to form a militia, because it just goes to show, again, a lot of these same people that are yelling about, taking gun rights away from Americans are the same people that are glad that the U.S. government is paying billions of dollars to arm Ukrainian citizens, again, further proving that citizens with a gun are a good thing. It's just, there's so much irony and dichotomy in these thought processes that it's laughable.
Right. But you don't need an AR-15 to go hunting. So
yeah, no, exactly. This is one of my favorite things is showing somebody a picture of an AR-15 and being like, okay, here's another rifle, the same caliber. Which one scares you more? You know what I mean? It's just like, I've told so many other people too, but they're like, well, isn't like an AR-15, like, isn't that just like one of the most deadly weapons? It's like, well, first off, yeah, it's a deadly weapon in general. If you get shot with a gun, an AR-15, and then I shoot you with, I don't know, a 30-06, you're going to be dead either way. There's no more dead than the other. You know what I mean? But it's just like, dude, you understand that most people go hunting with larger calibers than that very often. It's just like, oh, well, it's just that's not what you guys use in the military, though. It's like, no, you're right, it's not what we use in the military. We have even bigger ones than that in the military. It's just, there's no logical train of thought to me.
I like the counterpoint when people are like, only the military should have AR-15s. And I'm like, okay, well, the military never has AR-15s.
Right.
So are we going to give them to them now? Like,
exactly.
Do you understand the difference here? And then you're talking about you're talking about like scary gun and non-scary gun. You can take like the AR-15, right? That's the scary gun. You can take a Ruger Mini 14. It'll take 20, 30 round mags, still shoot 5.56. It's still semi-automatic. It'll do everything the AR-15 can, probably a little bit better. And it's just a wooden gun, but like that's fine. It's perfectly okay. It's no big deal.
It's because it doesn't look like an M4. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's literally the whole thing people get hung up on, in my opinion.
Yeah. And then there's the whole like, well, AR, it stands for assault rifles. Like, no, it doesn't. It stands for Armalite. Yeah, Armalite rifle patent number 15. That's why it's called AR-15.
That's even scarier, Zach. You better. I'm shaking over here, dude.
Because of the two letters A and R, they freak you out.
Honestly, it's probably because this is like my 5,000th gram of caffeine today. So honestly,
nice.
Yeah,
you're reining the day.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know. What are you drinking, Rob? It looked like, is that sweet tea?
Nope, this is a little bourbon.
Hell yeah. Good for you.
That's right.
I thought you were about to say it's illegal moonshine.
That's right.
It could be.
That's right.
The FBI might be listening. They might come Ruby Ridge yet. You don't know.
Now, we're in Florida. We're free down here. We don't have any laws in Florida.
Right. Exactly. This is the second episode in a row where our guest has had bourbon. I like it. Maybe we should make that a thing. Nice. Yeah. Trent had some nice bourbon, and Rob's got some bourbon. Maybe we should have bourbon.
We should just make our own bourbon, even though like it'll probably taste horrible, and just sell it like it's the best bourbon ever to exist.
There you go. You call it I Came With Fire. That'd be a good name for a bourbon, right?
It would be.
That's true. Or moonshine.
That's right.
I'm copyrighting it right now verbally. Can't take our idea. I will sue you.
Yeah. But one of the interesting connections I found in researching, I didn't know this, is I wasn't old enough to remember the Ruby Ridge incident in '92. I was only 5, but I do remember the Oklahoma City bombing and when that happened and seeing that on the news. And but I had no idea that Timothy McVeigh went to Waco and was a supporter out there, essentially protesting against the siege that was going on there. And then I did not know until this week doing some research that Timothy McVeigh cited Ruby Ridge as a reason about why he did what he did, right? And I'm definitely not justifying blowing up a building, right? But I'm just saying that it's kind of nuts I had no idea that was his motivation behind that. Did you guys know that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
So if you think about it, like if you take somebody that's already far right extremist, right? Somebody that's already that I'm 100% on my own. I don't like the government. I hate everything to do with the government. And then you throw a compounding factor like Ruby Ridge, and then you throw a compounding factor on like Waco, and you already hate the government. Like in your soul, you can't stand the government. And then these two things happen that just, fuels your fire and hate. I mean, it's going to push somebody over the edge, right? Like it is. It's not unthinkable that somebody's going to say, all right, government, you've already overstepped your bounds. You've already said you don't care about your citizens. You already said you're going to kill your citizens without due process. You can take your constitution and shove up your ass because it doesn't mean anything because you've already killed people without even giving them due process.
Right.
I'm going to go after you.
It's very easy to see why that becomes the motivation for somebody to go do something like that. And there's a bunch of cases, criminal cases, right, of people citing things like Waco, or big government for why they did things. And I'll say this, right, like, again, blowing up a building, doing something like that, those things are not okay. But at the same time, these are symptoms of government infringement. You know what I mean? On rights as American citizens. And it honestly makes me wonder if something like that happened today, because you did mention the Bundy Ranch thing, right? It obviously did not escalate to the point that Ruby Ridge did, but it makes me really wonder today what that would look like. Obviously, like the technology that these 3-letter agencies have is a lot better than they had in '92, right? So it been a lot easier to see what was going on in that house. There'd be drones involved, there'd be all kinds of other stuff. You know what I mean? But it really makes me wonder.
Tracks.
A lot easier to cover their tracks, but it makes me wonder too, because if you, aside from some of the bigger like newspapers back in the day, like I said, the New York Times, like their entire headline for when the siege was over was "White Supremacist Surrenders." You know what I mean? I wonder what the political climate in the United States, what the court of public opinion would do with this. God, I mean, like just the misinformation and then the online smear campaigns would just be insane. It already is. If you go Google, or if you go to Instagram or TikTok, or wherever you try and look some of this stuff up, you get so much stuff from, like you said, the far right, the far left, people that are like, wow, this actually is freaking insane. And there's somebody that works on base that I'm friends with who'd never heard of this. And I told her, I was like, hey, because she started listening to the podcast. I was like, hey, go look up Ruby Ridge. This is what we're going to talk about. And, I kind of told her, what we were going to do. And the next day I seen her and she's like, dude, I read this and I sent it to like 8 other people. She's like, that's so wild what happened. She's like, I can't believe that's just so disgraceful what they did, and it's just, but it makes me really wonder what that would look like today in today's age. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It'd be pretty insane.
It would be.
I can't. Well, it's like a pendulum, right? So you had Ruby Ridge. It happened, and it was like huge government overreach. So then, obviously, the people at Waco know that happened, and they're now like aware that this is how it could go. So like the pendulum's going to swing back this way, and then there's a big overreaction from the government there. And then you get the pendulum for the Oklahoma. Like it's going to keep swinging further and further the more momentum it gets. So it's nice that the cattle ranch one didn't like swing real hard, I guess, and it settled relatively peacefully. But
I think in my opinion,
time, you could knock the pendulum real hard, and it's going to come back. It's going to come back at you just as hard.
Well, I think one of the reasons the Bundy Ranch thing didn't go like Ruby Ridge is because of how many people were there with guns, right?
Yeah.
And to me, this is one of these situations where American citizens stood up and the government backed down. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And dude, in my opinion, that's the way it should be. You know, if your people, you govern at my permission. You know what I mean? And that's
represent me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So,
but it's all about that smear campaign too, because I mean, you look at the Bundy situation, and you can't really say a cattle rancher is an evil entity. It's as easy as you could say a Aryan nation white supremacist is an evil entity.
Exactly. Right.
Two different playing fields.
Yeah.
So
no
it's
kidding.
a lot easier to run a smear campaign when somebody's already got that reputation of being a bad person.
Yeah. They could probably spin cattle rancher to being like the death of like the environment because they keep farting methane gas.
Oh, there you go, man. See, you're helping them out now, Zach. You're just helping them out, dude.
It's because I'm still a fit boy.
Right? They're all killers.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. All Yellowstone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know, man, because when you consider just like what the newspapers and the media was back in 92, the internet was not a thing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a lot of these, the news people get is either on TV or from newspapers, right? And so it's become so much easier now to kind of regulate what the narrative is because everything is online and instant. So when you have all these newspapers, if you go and look at some of the news now, these smaller publications, they are all just kind of like subsidized by bigger newspapers. So they really only print what, like, you know, the Washington Post or the New York Times or whatever prints and says. And you even see that, like, I've read plenty of news articles before from smaller publications. It's like, oh, this is the same article from Waco or the New York Times or whatever. You didn't have that back then. If you were reading, I don't know, the Sacramento Bee, right? You were reading, well, I mean, that's a newspaper here in Sacramento, right? Is you're reading what somebody did, you know, the work on to report on, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's why it's so easy. And honestly, I was kind of surprised to find so many old articles from actually 1992 in August online, you know? And again, like, you know, it could be easy to go in and edit some of these articles. Nothing I read in them seemed like it had been changed. You know what I mean? Because you find so many that honestly defend the Weaver family, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then there are some, it's, you know, it's in your typical places you expect, right? You know, New York, California, where they're being condemned and stuff like that. But I feel like it would be a lot more now, you know, than it would have been back then too. But you know, the way technology has changed the game too is kind of wild. Even with like artificial intelligence, when you had that picture that came out, do you remember a couple months ago where it looked like there was a bomb at the Pentagon, and it, like it would be so easy now with the way they change people's voices and they can, you know, generate, you know, photos and video that look legitimate, you know, to have something like that. You can make it worse. It can start something like that Pentagon photo started a bunch of shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
the
kind
White
of nuts.
House had to like come out publicly and be like, "That's fake. There's
That's
no
fake.
bomb at the Pentagon." Like,
exactly.
Stop calling 911, please.
Yeah, and we don't know whose cocaine this is.
Right. Yeah.
Just saying. You know what I mean? Most secure building in the United States, probably.
Yeah.
But, probably.
Yeah. I'm just saying, man.
More secure one?
I don't know, dude. Like I've never been in all the buildings, but I'm pretty sure, you know, that's probably top 3 at least.
Yeah, it's definitely top 3. It's got to be.
The other most secure ones are got to be in the vicinity, though. I mean, you got the CIA headquarters around there. You know, the president doesn't know everything, so just saying.
Well, in August of 1992, the most secure building was probably Randy Weaver's cabin. No one was allowed in or out.
Apparently, that's true. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I guess to kind of keep this one rolling with Ruby Ridge, the place where the ATF and the other three-letter agencies failed, I will say that our court system definitely succeeded because
absolutely.
When they went in and both sides were heard and he was tried, him and Kevin were tried with the jury. They were all indicted and they were acquitted. So I think the only charge that stuck with Randy was his failure to appear in court charge.
It was.
He ended up serving like an extra 4 months. But the truth came out and the courts were able to say, you know what, the FBI and the ATF and the U.S. Marshals were dead wrong in this situation.
Yeah.
They didn't have their ducks in a row and they failed. so that was good to hear. And one of the, I was doing a little bit of research before I came on here too, just so I made sure I had a lot of my facts straight too, is that, they're talking about the supremacy clause, and that the FBI agents and the ATF agents didn't have to follow Idaho law because they're the federal government. So, which is true, right? So, the supremacy clause says that federal law trumps state law. But when you have a jury that is Idahoans, and you're saying, hey, you don't matter because we're the federal government, when you're already in a case where the federal government just royally screwed up.
Yeah,
I mean, that tipped the whole court in the Randy and Kevin's favor when you got the jury from Idaho say, yeah, right, the federal government, watch this. So
to show you who runs this.
That's right. So
what's interesting though with the supremacy, with the whole supremacy clause, the county that Randy Weaver lived in tried to indict the sniper who shot Vicki. And they were like, we want him to come, we want him to be charged, like all this stuff. And it went to the feds, and the feds were like, nah. And they said supremacy clause, you can't arrest him, you can't do anything. And it didn't go anywhere after that. But yeah, the county also wanted that sniper to stand trial for his shot and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. The FBI's official line was that they were treating everybody but Randy and his friend as hostages.
Yep.
So I mean, that makes sense. If you're shooting and killing unarmed hostages, it sounds like a crime to me.
Right.
Yeah. No supremacy clause or otherwise. Yeah. I honestly don't know that the courts would have seen it that way here now, other than the way they did. And I agree with you. It's definitely a victory for, rights and the American people that happened and played out the way it did. I kind of doubt that it would play out that way because, again, the court of public opinion has a say, and it has more of a say now with just the way the media is. And I feel like it would go a lot differently. So,
right. Yeah, so do I. Especially as we see more and more of, not to get crazy political with everything, but like the liberal sways of the states, and the courts. It's definitely it's crazy.
Yeah. No, I agree. It would have been different, like if, the state of Idaho, right? Or if this happened in like, I don't know, New York, for instance, or another state that, is more blue than red or whatever, So I agree. That definitely would have played out that way. But I just don't understand how these guys got to keep their jobs after that happened, to wind up there, with the Branch Davidians, David Koresh, Waco, Texas, to screw up again. I don't know, Zach, maybe you can answer this question, but like, did any of those guys that happened to screw up twice lose their jobs after Waco?
So
I didn't see anything about that.
None of them lost their jobs. Some were like forced retired, but I don't know, like,
yeah.
Boo you. I do know the one who talks the most about it is the sniper team lead, because he was at both. He actually quit. He's the type of person who I think realized what was going on, and that he didn't want to be a part of it anymore, and that he was like, I'm tired of this stuff. So he actually resigned and quit. Didn't get a pension or anything either. He just walked away from it all. He still openly talked about it. I think he's still alive today too. He's still open to talk about it or whatever, both instances and the mistakes the agency's made. So I can't remember his name though, but I can remember his face very vividly.
I know the ATF. They kind of got after Waco, Ruby Ridge and Waco. The ATF kind of got shut out from the other three-letter agencies. I know FBI stopped trusting the ATF as much, and the whole government kind of put the ATF on the back burner. It's almost why you don't really hear a lot about the ATF anymore, unless it's like a major firearm thing going on. Like the ATF is kind of quiet. I think that a lot of their mistakes from those two incidences have kind of put them on the back burner as an agency that a lot of people trust. And still, there's a lot of people that have zero trust or faith in the ATF.
They were very demilitarized after that too, because they used to have APCs, helicopters, missiles, a whole bunch of crazy stuff, because that's what they thought they were going to potentially fight against. Now it's bunch of people wearing like suits and maybe like a pistol or a rifle or so, but like they're not like super militarized anymore. They actually use local police agencies or like FBI to do that for them. They don't actually do it anymore. They just kind of oversee. So
sounds appropriate. So when you talked to Randy, did he ever mention that he like had any intention at any point to try and come out, like as he got some separation from that situation and be more public about his side, or he just, that turned him off to even trying to engage?
No, he was definitely still engaged. The media kind of shut him out still a lot, but he was. I mean, every public event that was brought up about Waco, even during Waco, he was still a big part in that. Anything that was really what he felt was government overreach, I mean, he was a very large proponent of speaking out against it. So there's actually quite a few speeches that he's done, and him and his daughter Sarah that have kind of traveled the country to highlight some of the oversteppings of the government.
Yeah, I saw that, obviously after the incident happened, the kids were taken away for a while, but I saw that Sarah and him ended up having a really good relationship later, which I was really glad to see because, I get, for the sake of the investigation and until, obviously everything was cleared up, looking after the children. But yeah, it's good. I'm glad that played out that way. I was glad to see that. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And as far as like everything inside the cabin, like he never had any intentions of coming out because of the fact that, he felt that as soon as he stepped out of the door, he was going to be shot. So it wasn't a, hey, I'm going to surrender because as soon as I come out, I mean, you've already proven that you're going to kill me. And it wasn't until that they had an actual a civilian negotiator that he trusts to actually talk him out. Because, I mean, if you think about it, like you're in a cabin, your wife was just shot, through the head. Your friend was just shot through the arm with the same bullet that just killed your wife. Your son was already shot in the back. Your dog's dead. I mean, these guys are definitely not there to take you peacefully.
No.
So, yeah, he never had any intentions of going out without, without dying. And if it wasn't for a civilian negotiator saying, hey, listen, we're out here. There's film crews out here. We guarantee you that nothing's going to happen when you step out because everything's being recorded now.
But wasn't
it was a former commander, wasn't it? Commander of his.
He had two visitors. His former commander of his is the one who went up there and saw that Vicki was dead. That was like day 6 or something. And saw that Vicki was dead. And he asked Weaver, he's like, okay, can I take her out of here? Can we remove her so she can be out of here? And Weaver's like, yeah, that's fine. And so the commander left with Vicki. He put her in a body bag and came down. And that's when the ATF and FBI was like, wait, she's dead? And that's when they know they killed her. Like, it was days after they'd shot her that they're like, oh, what the heck?
Right.
Duh. And then it was a representative that Weaver trusted that was the one that later on went up to and actually got him to come out. So, yeah. With obviously, so you spoke with Randy years after the fact and all type of stuff. And I know you just said that he did speeches and a bunch of other stuff, but what was he like talking to him? Is he, because the whole media painted him as a white supremacist and a conspiracy nut and all this other type of stuff for a while, and even when he did pass away, they still called him those things. So, what was he? How was he as a person?
So he was a normal mountain man. Like if I could describe him when I met him in Calico by a campfire, he was a guy that just liked being in the woods and being by himself. Talking to him, he wasn't. I mean, of course, he still had hard feelings towards the government, but he didn't it wasn't projected. Like his demeanor and his stance wasn't like, I hate the world. The world owes me something for what happened. He was a very humbled guy and very easy to talk to. He's, for him to open up and share a lot of the stuff that he shared with me and some of the stuff, that I didn't talk about during this just because it was a lot of his personal stuff that he kind of went in with me. For him to open up and talk, as freely like that, it was pretty awesome to hear from him.
Yeah. I got a situation for the both of you, right? So all three of us are cops or prior cops, right? Let's say you're a normal officer just patrolling like highways or whatever, and you pull someone over for going like 15 over, and then you walk up to the window and it's Randy Weaver. Do you just let him go? You give him a pass? Like, I think the government's got enough from you. I don't need to issue the citation, or you write him that ticket. What are you doing to Randy Weaver?
You go ahead first, Rob. Guest privilege.
Yeah. So Randy Weaver, I'd probably say, meet me at the bar later. I'll buy you a beer, and
Right.
we'll have a chit chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely
I totally
letting
agree.
him go. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm letting him go.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
going.
Absolutely.
The government's already taken enough. Have a good one.
Oh, yeah.
See you later.
Dude, yeah. No. I mean, go live your life, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a nice day.
Slow down a little bit, please. But go live.
Yeah, right. I'll remember your car. So if you cruise by me again, I'll just wave.
Yeah.
Not 9, you're fine. 10, you're mine. So let's
Right.
keep it.
Yeah.
Let's keep it a little better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's really cool that you got the opportunity to meet him, and given what he went through, it's pretty remarkable to consider, like you said, that, what happened to him, that outward, aggression and hate, you didn't see anything like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it would be really easy for somebody to go down that path. And, you met him, he didn't know you. And it's so easy when you meet somebody for the first time, you can kind of get a tell for them, especially if you're law enforcement, you deal with people all the time, that it is a testament to really sounds like who he truly was, right? To not just be like, oh man, I'm this guy and, F this and F that. And, this is what happened. And, and leave that in. And it would be understandable why somebody would feel that way. Like there's a photo of his mugshot and he looks very upset, and it'd be easy to see if somebody maintained that, those feelings years later until your death, so just to me, it sounds like it's a testament to really who he was, that you met him and, you had no idea, down to earth, normal dude, likes being out in the woods. So
Yeah, especially when I told him what I did for a living, that I was one in the military and two law enforcement in the military. And like he could have immediately just said, "No, you're dead to me. Don't talk to me because you're just under law enforcement." But I mean, he wasn't. He opened up, and told me his story. So totally awesome. I don't know, it's because it's military to military. We all kind of have that connection where it's very easy to talk to other military guys, but still with that law enforcement background, I mean that definitely a black mark on me from him. So
yeah, definitely. It makes me think of one time I was on patrol. This is at Maelstrom, and I pulled this kid over. It's like 2:00 in the morning. He was speeding. He's like an old Buick, and I get up to the window, and he starts reading the Constitution to me, and I was like, what is going on? So I stopped him. I'm like, hey man. I was like, nah, we're not doing that. Listen, this is what's going on. Let me get your cat card, yada, yada, yada. And he's like, you can't ask me for any of that stuff and blah, blah, blah. Like trying to tell me that he has all these, these rules that I'm breaking and that the LiDAR is not actually
traveling.
I'm not actually traveling.
Yeah, the LiDAR is not actually a LiDAR, that it's a gun that takes photos of license plates and is actually putting him in a database. And I was like, let me clue you in on something for a second, buddy. You're an airman in the Air Force. If you don't like the government, you went the wrong way. I don't know if anybody told you that. You know what I mean? But it's just like that. I mean, what you said, like he could have found out you were a cop and in the military, and then that situation could have gone the totally other way. Just didn't want to talk to you, somebody to go through what he did. But this kid, I pulled him over at 2:00 in the morning, right? He's got so much disdain, I don't know, such a juxtaposition. But it just made me think of that, and it's just kind of funny. Like, how are you going to be in the Air Force and tell me that the government is, it's like you're in the wrong spot, bro.
Yeah,
you're in the wrong job.
It's the same thing when you have like the super liberals who are like upset with capitalism and they're like tweeting about it on their iPhone. That's only possible because of capitalism.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. Well,
it's just ironic.
It is.
So you, this is a little off topic. I was thinking about it in the very beginning. So you said you scuba dive too, Rob?
Yeah, I'm huge into scuba diving. I'm currently doing my dive master training, so I can lead dives, and then hopefully shortly after that, I'll go for my instructor certification, so I can start teaching scuba diving. Man, it's just being under the water it's kind of like my zen, like my peaceful area. Like you don't have any weight. There's you're just free floating. Scuba diving is so thought intensive, like you have to constantly think about what you're doing. So everything else, like all your other stressors in life, they're not with you on the dive. Like, so it's 60 minutes of just peace. So that's my escape, and being down here, I go all the time. So I do a lot of diving out of Destin. I've actually linked up with the Okaloosa County, the guy that sinks all the wrecks in Destin. He's the resource advisor. So I've been going out on some of those as they're sinking ships. Like I'll go out on a different boat.
Oh, that's cool.
Watch the boat sink, and then I'll go dive on the boat just to make sure
the first one to be there.
Yeah, first one to dive on it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
So it's awesome, man. I love it for sure.
So I tried diving when I was stationed on Okinawa, and I tried getting into diving and stuff, and I learned that I don't like underwater very much. I kept having like panic attacks or whatever. And I remember like we were down low and we weren't even that far. I think we were like maybe like 5-10 feet or whatever. And he was having us do he would come up and mess with your mask. You're supposed to clear it and stuff. Yeah. And I couldn't get past that. Every time he would come and mess with my mask, I'd freak out and I'd swim back to the top. And he was like, "Yeah, I don't think diving's for you, Zach. You can snorkel, but diving ain't it." And I've never gone back into it. I don't know what it is about being underwater.
The best way to get over that mask fear, because it's like a big fear, is having your mask flood. It's just taking a mask and going in the shower with it. Go in the shower, flood it while you're in the shower. Like look around with the mask with water in it, and then clear it. But you're in the shower, so you're not freaking out because you're there.
So this is a little embarrassing tidbit of me. After I tried,
I don't take showers.
I don't take showers. That's why I lost my hair. Yeah. After I was got freaked out with diving and stuff, I now, if I'm taking a shower, I can't let the water run on my face. I always look away. I know I can breathe and all this type of stuff, but I freak out. I can't have water hit my face.
Yeah, there's no luck
really
for you.
Weird.
You're not going to be a diver.
Yeah,
I know exactly. I got worse trying to dive.
Yeah,
dude, that's weird, man.
What's funny is I can snorkel, and I can dive deep while snorkeling. But I think it's maybe just I can't go too deep, But I think it's just the idea of if I'm snorkeling stuff, I'm like, oh, I'll just go right back up.
Yeah.
But I think there's that fear with diving is at a certain depth, it's not I'll just go back up. It's oh crap, I gotta wait.
You have to
figure it out on my way back up. And I think it's where it scares me is you can't always just go right back up.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. So what's the end goal? I know you have your page and all that, and you're getting your master diving certification. Is this something you're trying to turn into a business for yourself, or is that something that you're going to try and get a job doing with somebody else? Or
yeah, so I'll probably with Dive Master, I'll probably just do it on the side. Go out on the weekends, just be a hand on the boat and do some dives. I also work part time as a zookeeper, so that's my I get to hang out with animals all day. So that's, I wouldn't give that up. So I would almost have 2 part-time jobs where I'd work with animals and then I'd go scuba diving. So
that sounds epic.
Eventually, if I become an instructor, then it would just be instructing students on the side and just make a little bit extra cash. But
yeah,
nothing crazy.
What would you say your favorite dive is?
In Florida or just
could be anywhere. Maybe all time.
So probably when I went out to Stewart Coves in the Bahamas, that was one of my first ocean dives, and it was the first time I actually scuba dived with sharks and got to see shipwrecks. And that's one that definitely stands out to me the most because it was my first. But here in the Gulf area, I really like the Courageous. It's a shipwreck that the Air Force did munitions testing on. So
Okay.
they put this big boat out in the middle of the Gulf. The Air Force came through and dropped a JDAM on it. There's actually the Air Force Research Laboratories has a video on it. One of my YouTube videos has their video on it, where you see the JDAM go down and hit the ship, and it goes under. I went and dove that one, so it was pretty awesome to see that big old wreckage just mangled up on the seafloor. So that one's pretty cool.
Dude, I cannot lie to you. First off, I've never dove before. Like, I've done the snorkeling thing, but the idea of swimming around sharks, that, like, I'm sure it's just a giant I see it all the time on YouTube or whatever. People do it all the time. But man, Zach, if you're freaking out like already with your mask, like, I feel like that's be the spot where I'd freak it, be like, oh shoot, it's a shark, and start freaking out about it. Like, I don't know, it's just, they've got to be one of those things which is like a misunderstood creature, I guess. Maybe
100%.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
It's like Finding Nemo. You're gonna come across Bruce
totally.
and be like, hello.
Yeah, that's right.
The name's Bruce.
Fish are friends, not food.
I bet a shark, when they see humans, are like, what the heck is that? Like,
Most of the time they swim away from you. Like when you go down there, you make all that noise with your regulator and blowing bubbles, and they're usually like, no, I don't want nothing to do with that scary looking thing that's under the water right now. Because
most people that get bit by sharks are usually like on surfboards or like boogie boards, because then they get confused for like a seal or like a otter, not a sea otter, but like they get confused for something a shark would eat.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, whoops. And then actually most sharks, when they do, the people who survive shark attacks, like the shark will bite them and then be like, you're gross, you're like really bony, and they'll spit it back out and leave. Like they're not. They're expecting something else, and when they take the bite of you at a board, they go, "That's not good." They leave. So
even the divers that get bit by sharks, it's normally during like a shark feeding. Like you're down there trying to feed a shark, and you get bit, and you're like, "Oh, why did I get bit by this shark?"
Because I stuck my hand in his mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah. Man, what's funny is, I feel like that would be scary for sure. And obviously, like, I know I would probably like try to keep my calm. But one thing that I've always wanted to do is get one of those like cages and like swirl around. You know what I mean? Like, you see those people that are like off the coast of Australia. There's the great whites and doing that. Dude, that just seems like a thrill, man. Like, I would do that in a heartbeat. You ever done that?
I haven't. Nope, I haven't done any cage diving, but I would definitely do it.
Yeah, I bet you would, man. Like,
I'd probably get out of the cage and go swim with them. I'm like, oh,
right?
This cage.
Yeah. Oh man.
I don't know why you would ever leave America and come up to the communist state of New York, but if you ever do, there's a lake called Neversink, and in that lake is a town called Bittersweet. It's an entire town. It used to be it was a town up to, I think, like the 1960s or 1970s. And then they had to like flood a reservoir or whatever. So the whole town was like, hey, you got to leave. Like, it's not a thing anymore.
I think I read about
and
that.
It's like 200 feet under the water, and it's this whole town. And before they flooded it, they actually set it up because they knew it was going to be like a dive spot. So they have like mannequins like behind counters and stuff.
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
So that'd be pretty scary.
Yeah, they have like cars or whatever. And like there's like videos of like what it looked like at first, and it looked okay, but like today it looks really weird because it's like covered in moss.
Oh, I bet, dude.
Other stuff.
Yeah,
that's gotta be creepy.
Scared scared scuba diving, it would be that, because I'd go around.
Would it be?
Like, I'd go through the McDonald's and there'd be somebody standing there and scare the shit out of me. So that's exactly
right. Your flashlight's just like panning over, and it's just this like face like looking at you.
Yeah.
That would scare the shit out of me, especially if you weren't expecting it, man.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't know,
they're trying to give you his milkshake for his birthday,
right?
What the heck?
I'm pretty sure there's a place like that in Montana too. I want to say it was maybe it's a Canyon Ferry. I think has like remnants of a town under it too, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's one of them. It might be Canyon Ferry. I know there's one of them up there that they had some big flood.
That's pretty cool, man.
Might be. So I know Lake McDonald is the same way too. Like they had a bunch of ice houses and stuff that collapsed in the ice.
Yeah, I remember learning about that going up to Glacier. But you ever dove there? Can you even dive at Lake McDonald?
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that go up there and dive it. I haven't. The coldest lake that I dove was Seeley Lake up in Kalispell. And that one was cold. It was like freaking 48 degrees.
Yeah. So what's your bucket list dive, or like a couple of them?
So one of my bucket list dives was diving the U.S. Oriskany, which is the big aircraft carrier that sunk down here in the Gulf, which I just dove a couple weeks ago. So I knocked that one off. That one was pretty awesome.
I saw that.
And then Australia, the Great Barrier Reef is huge. And I'm going out to Egypt in a few months to go dive the Red Sea. So that's going to knock off another one of my bucket lists.
Oh, man.
But it's pretty awesome.
Dude, I have always wanted to go to Egypt like my whole life, but that's pretty cool. Are you going to do anything else when you go there? Or are you just like diving and go see the pyramids? Or?
Yeah, so we're going to do 7 days of diving on a liverboard. And then once we get done doing that, we got to have a couple days on land before we can fly again. So we're going to check out like the pyramids and go over to Luxor and stay on the Nile and do some stuff around there.
That sounds pretty awesome, man.
I have always wanted to go to Egypt as well, and not assuming I even like thought about like we should make a trip here soon or whatever.
You're gonna need some like SPF 200, dude.
That's fine. That's perfectly fine. I'll be protected by the pharaohs, so I'll be all right.
Oh, okay.
So the bad part about it is I heard that like if you're looking at the pyramids, like it looks like the National Geographic pyramids, but if you do a 180-degree turn, it's like completely Americanized.
I've heard that too.
Like McDonald's, like a Taco Bell, like it's crazy. So
stuff like that makes me wish I could just like bring like Ramses back and be like, okay, this is what 6,000 years later is what this stuff looks like. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Do you think like King Tut thought there'd be like a Taco Bell within walking distance of the pyramids?
Not at all, dude. King Tut couldn't even walk that well. He was like super deformed.
Do you think Cleopatra would die if she ate a chalupa? You think her body could handle a chalupa from Taco Bell?
I don't know, man. I've always like these are like conversations you have on post, but like the one is like if you could give like a pilgrim a monster energy, like what would happen? I would pay to see that. Like that would just be probably one of the funniest things ever. First off, like they probably had no idea like this is the flavor they've never probably had before, anything close to it. And like obviously like they had beer and stuff like that back then, so they knew what carbonation was. You know what I mean? But not to probably the degree that some of this stuff is. You remember those Monster Nitros? You remember those? Dude, those things, man.
Milligrams of caffeine.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah, those things are insane. There was a guy, one of our flight chiefs when I first got to Malmstrom. The only thing I ever saw this dude eat was Monster Nitros and beef jerky, and that dude could clear out the armory, man. Like that was bad. It was bad. Yeah. So that would screw up. Like just like Plymouth Rock. You're like, man, I got the watch, dude. You gotta look out for the natives. Here's a monster. What is this?
There was a Sergeant Brinks at Fairchild, and he always had a Mountain Dew with him, and he just like always like I don't think he ever had water in his life. He was just always drinking Mountain Dew, but he could outrun all of us, outpizza everyone. Like he was an animal. But I recently heard he had like diabetes or something. It's not something like to laugh about, I guess, but it's all the Mountain Dew, that guy.
Makes sense, right? Yeah.
No. Dude, one of the flight chiefs I had in Montana, I think you know him, Chris Tilt. You remember him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Only thing I ever saw that dude eat was Snickers bars and Mountain Dew Live Wire. And like he had this lunch pail, he'd come around and like just walking and it's just it's just rattling. And I remember one time he like opened it and I just like looked in it and it was like 6 or 7 like Snickers bars in there and two bottles of like the Live Wire. And I was like, Sergeant Tilp, I'm like, what are you gonna do when you're like 50 and the only thing you've eaten for 20 years is Snickers bars and Mountain Dew? He's like, I don't care. I'm like, okay, I know. It's just like that's just so fun. It's like the only thing you consume is that and dip. It's just to crack me up. I love Sergeant Tilp. He's so funny. But yeah,
I think it's so interesting the stuff like we consume like on post or whatever to get to the day or kind of like table stuff. Whenever I used to get like pretty bad headaches and stuff, and I would combat it with BC powder. You know what BC powder is?
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that.
Yeah, so it's like a little powder, and it's got like aspirin in it, and it's also got like 200 milligrams of like caffeine and like something else. But I would take BC powder and like a Red Bull, and I would put the BC powder in the Red Bull and then just down it. Headache gone, pain gone, alertness like at 11. Like,
Yeah.
I was ready.
Dude, one of the scariest things I've ever seen in my life was one of my troops about to work the vehicle entrapment area for the day. And he takes a Monster and he pours it into like one of these like 32-ounce coffee mugs, and then brings out 2 5-hour energies, shakes them up, pours them in there, and just downs this thing. I'm like, you're going to die. Like, I've never seen anybody take that much caffeine like in one take. You know what I mean? Like, you got to pace that out through the day.
He was ready for the 14-hour shift.
Well, dude, it was that, and it was probably like 2 degrees outside. And he's like, you know, I don't know what else I'm going to do. I'm like, you better let me know, man, if you're having a heart attack out there, because it gets busy in here. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, that was the craziest thing I've ever seen anybody do. It's just like, hey, he was fine. It's just like the body can take more Yeah.
He's fine that day.
Right. Yeah. No, now he's got like endometriosis or something like that because of that. But yeah.
What? Do you know what endometriosis is?
I don't know. Endocarditis, that's what I meant to say.
Unless he's a woman.
Yeah, no. Endometriosis. You're right. I'm gonna blame it on the caffeine. No, endocarditis, that's what I meant to say.
Hey, you never know. A Monster and 2 5-hour energies, it might do something to your body.
That's true. Yeah, right. God, dude.
Transgendered him.
I'm such an idiot. You know what I mean? Just sitting here like things that make no sense. You know what I mean? We've been talking about things that make no sense the whole podcast. So
that's right.
There you go.
Yeah, like the feds.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
No. But anyway, yeah. No, I really appreciate you coming on and just hearing a little bit about, you know, him, because at least like we were talking about earlier, it's so easy to other somebody, and that seems to be, when you look it up, what happens. And so to hear just about him as a human being, you know, and to hear that he wasn't a bitter person, you know, willing to, you know, sit there and talk to you and can talk about it. Cause I mean, that's gotta be super hard to talk about. Like, I couldn't even imagine experiencing something like that, you know, losing your wife and your son in that way and all that. But it just, you know, so I'm glad that we're able to at least, you know, bring some information and humanize him, you know, to people who do end up listening, because at the end of the day, whether, you know, you sit there and you want to, you know, get caught up on the white supremacist thing and think what you want about all of that, you know, at the end of the day, we're all still American citizens with rights, and we all have the same rights, and those rights don't come from the government. You know, they are inherent to us as human beings. And I think a lot of people forget that the government doesn't give you your rights. It's supposed to protect them. And at the end of the day, you know, I'm glad that you're able to humanize him a little bit for us. And I appreciate getting that perspective from you.
For sure. Absolutely. Yep. And so if you guys really want to know like his side of the story, I don't know if you guys will be able to see it, but I'm going to pull up a picture of it. Here. So this is his book that he wrote. It's called The Federal Siege at Ruby Ridge. Him and his daughter Sarah wrote it. So this is like the full actual accounts of everything that happened on Ruby Ridge from Randy Weaver and his daughter. So that's like their testimony. So
absolutely. And I'm going to put, so if you guys, if anybody listening has never followed us on social media, please do. But our highlights have a link to books for people that we've had on the podcast before. So I'm going to link that book. And then I'm going to link your page as well, your YouTube page, and so people can go find. So please go find Active Duty Outdoors. Support an awesome person diving. If you like that kind of stuff, it's just, I mean, I don't know if you could watch a video of the Gulf and not just fall in love instantly anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's literally the most beautiful place. Yeah, you're too scared to dive. So just live vicariously through Rob, because he's got you covered, you know. Yeah. And I think it's cool too that you got your kids out there with you too doing that, man. Like that's got to be a dream. So, but we'll link your page out there. This coming week, I know I got that photo from you, and I'll put that up. And so please go check out Active Duty Outdoors. I'll post the link to that book as well. But yeah, man, no, for real, thank you so much for coming on with us. Yeah, man. You got any closing remarks there, Zach?
Just say, please like, comment, subscribe, all the
For sure.
stupid jargon that we got to say that actually works. I know it takes a couple seconds of your time for you to do it, but it really helps us out. So please do that.
Yep.
And just thanks for all listening, and thanks again, Rob, for being here. And yeah, it was a great episode. We enjoy it.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, you guys have a good night.
Yep, you guys too.